Okay, been doing some fall tillage, but decided I'd fix up my old field cultivator. This is a Ford field cultivator made back in like this is made back in the 60s, early 60s, I believe. I bought it from an old 80-year-old farmer like 20 years ago. And it has these shank holders. This part here is cast, this is steel, so this is cast iron, not cast steel. And they break, and when they break, the part that holds the shank bust out with it. So instead of trying to weld that cast, which is always kind of a crappy, weak weld, I made my own holders. I didn't make them though with the springs, because basically this is supposed to pivot here. This bolt goes through this cast piece. There's an eyelet there, and then it you know, you can see works that spring. But the original shanks though were a lot more rigid, double kind of a spring type shank that had a lot less flex. So I ordered these cheaper shanks from Agri Supply, which you can see they have a spring to them. They're thinner, they have a spring, so they'll take up some of the concussion that these normally would take up. So I had to do new holders. These are a little bit longer than what I want. So to get an even adjustment once I'm in the ground, you can see I heated these and bent them a little bit. So that I get everything the right height. The frame was splitting a little bit here, the tubing in spots. So I boxed it in. I brought a portable welder over here the other day and boxed in the frame in a few spots, mainly just on the wings, you know, because this thing's pretty light, and you get pulling it with a tractor that size, I could just see looking back behind me someday and the whole thing is all beat to hell. But I'm making it a lot better leveling tool. It seems like this actually requires more annual work on it than my disc does, because you're always replacing the teeth. Waiting for more teeth to come. I got these from Agri Supply, so these were like 13 bucks a piece or something, which is really cheap. You look in the Shoop's catalog, you know, a shank for a cultivator can be like 30 bucks. I'm putting these big shovels on just each outside shank on the wings, and then these just kind of a straight tooth on everything else. So I just, you know, it seems like I get about 150 acres out of the teeth before I've got to flip them or put new teeth on. So I don't know if it's gonna be warm enough to paint this year anymore, but I might just get some blue Ford paint and slop on here and get this, you know, all back together. I had one thing this spring, this axle holder for this whole axle busted off here, so I made a new piece here. You know, it was bouncing around pretty good, and I was yanking it through some sod, and that busted last spring. But the other thing I'm doing is improving my Midwest harrow. So these basically have a big long bolt that goes up through the bottom and up into here. There's two for this back harrow, and then one for each wing. And I'm gonna raise this up when I'm just doing primary, you know, first couple passes, and then for the finishing pass, the spring, I'll be able to loosen up that threaded rod, those bolts, and lower the Midwest harrow. All the years I had it, I never did any adjustment. The rods were just completely froze up. So I made these up, like these were the old rods here, and they're frozen. And my harrow needed to be lowered. So I made some of these up, 5/8 rod. I'm gonna put them on here real quick. And then maybe later this week get in here and finish this up. I'd chisel plowed this twice, 2 to 3 times in spots. And what I'd like to do is have it all finished and ready to go in the spring so that you get a really good firm seed bed. Better seed bed if you let it settle all winter long after you finish it. So, all right, let me get these rods. That basically is how that is. If I unfold this wing, then I can use this to control the depth of my Midwest harrow, so that I don't wear this harrow out when I'm doing some initial passes like here in the fall. I'll keep this up off the ground more. And then another thing, because these were all frozen up, I was never able to lower the harrow enough to really effectively do its job. So these are auction items, these Midwest harrows, so I'm gonna start looking at auctions for those. But yeah, you know, old Ford field cultivator doing its job. Pretty nice machine, really. I mean, I don't really till a lot of acreage each year. I'm only, you know, putting in about 50 acres of hay a year, so I don't need anything too fancy.